Okay. Hello and welcome everybody to the parsha class, parsha Tetzaveh 5783. There are a few quick announcements, just reminders that we do have quite a few Purim-related mitzvot that people can participate in, besides the Mishloach Manot, and which is an important fundraiser for the shul. But also there is the Suda that people should sign up for. Also, Matanot Levyonim, gifts to the poor, that you can either do through me or through one of the organizations that we use. Okay, let's get right into the parsha. The parsha is Tetzaveh, and it's mostly about, at least the first half for sure, is about the making of the clothing, the instructions for the making of the clothing of the kohen gadol. We're going to speak about some of the certain elements as we go along, as we go through our deep dive. But that's what the parsha is mostly about, and then a few of the sacrifices that Aaron and his sons had to participate in order to become inaugurated as the kohanim. All right, with no further ado, I think this is a great time to get into our deep dive. Look at the verses themselves in the source sheet that I sent out by email. All of you should have received it. If you do not have it and you would like it, let me know. Okay, Baruch Hashem, we're going to start towards the beginning, the 8th verse. We're going to talk about the ephod. So the verse tells us, first of all, "V'cheshev ufudato asher alav k'maasehu memenu yeh zahav tchelet v'argaman v'tolat shani v'sheish marzar." So the ephod, which it's not clear exactly what the ephod was, by the way. Rashi says it was a kind of apron worn sort of like backwards of how we would wear aprons. And there's a whole story that goes into how he came up with that. I think we might have spoken about that in previous years. Let me know later if we haven't. I'm very happy to tell that story. But it should be done just like the other things were done. It comes as one piece. Shouldn't have different pieces stitched to it. It comes as one woven piece that has in it gold and tchelet, whatever that is, v'argaman v'talad shani v'sheish marzar, purple crimson yarn, fine twisted linen. Let's go with Safari's translation for that. Getting right into the question that's posed by the Meshech Chachma, it says, so you're supposed to make this ephod, and the point of the ephod, the remez, the amru ephod, mechaper al avodah zarah. The ephod is supposed to somehow help people do teshuvah, is for avodah zarah. Right? You go to the Beit Hamikdash, you see the kohen wearing the ephod, and somehow the ephod is supposed to inspire you to say, I can't believe I worshiped that idol. That was so silly of me. Terrible me. I wish I could do teshuvah. So the ephod is some sort of like kapara for that. It can somehow atone or help atone for that. And it says the Meshech Chachma umachashecha etzel so Rosh Tevot 4 have kumase kamashikasu sof per kama the kedushin. So it says in the beginning, at the end of the first chapter of kedushin, first of 4, that the ephod had this ability for a reason. Of all the things that are in the clothing of the kohen, the ephod had the special ability to atone for the sin of avodah zarah. Why? Because avodah zarah is a unique sin. Avodah zarah has, besides everything else, it has something to do with machshava. It has to do with thought. In fact, the Gemara says that avodah zarah is the only sin that you can be punished for just for the thought of it. Right? You can think all kinds of terrible thoughts and plans. You shouldn't. It's a bad midah. It can lead to terrible things, whatever. But in theory, you won't get punished. You see somebody's car and you want to steal it. You shouldn't want to steal it. You shouldn't want the other person's car, etc., etc. But you plan on stealing a car like that, make it a little better, right? So not that person's car, some other car, it's like it. So that's bad. Don't get me wrong. But to think it is not a sin. It can lead to a sin, but it's not a sin in and of itself. When it comes to avodah zarah, you see. You see some people bowing down to some fat, jolly golden man, right? And then those people walk away, and just money falls upon them. They're covered in wealth, right? You think, well, maybe if I do that, maybe I should also do that. So even if you don't do that, just a plan to do it might be already a problem. We can paskin here, but if this becomes irrelevant. Lamaisa situation for you, let me know, and we can talk about it privately. All right, but the point is that machshava is already important in the making of this ephod and in the sin that it is mechaper. In other words, perhaps that's a connection, right? Perhaps the whole idea of machshava, of thinking, of having misplaced ideals and ideas, maybe that in and of itself needs some sort of a teshuva aspect, some sort of a ticket to forgiveness. Okay, let's go further. Shemot 28:15, Chavchet Tetvav. So now we're going to talk about something else. We're talking about the Choshen Mishpat. Again, there's some unclarity amongst the earlier commentaries about exactly what the Choshen Mishpat looked like. But assuming it was basically, it kind of looked like a book that you put something in it, you fold it closed, right? If it looks something like that, as Rashi says, and as I believe the Ramban agrees. Anyway, quite a few commentaries seem to say that that's what it was. The point is, Vasita Choshen Mishpat Maseh Choshev. It's supposed to be also work of shape, of design. Kamasa Ephod Ta'asenu. And you should that's how you should make it, like the other things. You make it like the ephod, ta'asenu, zahav, tchelet, v'agaman, talat shani, v'sheish marzar, tesa oto. So same thing again. You're supposed to make it out of gold and of tchelet and of purple and red yarn, and all together a fine twisted linen. Okay, now. What do the parts of the Choshen Mishpat, what do they mean? What do they represent? So there's a particularly long essay here that I have I put the whole thing into the source sheet, even though we're not using all of it. But it's a very beautiful essay if you have the opportunity to take a look. Wow. One moment. Awkward. I can't find what I'm looking for. See, I found this quoted in the Talalei Orot, where it's a much shorter quote than what I'm finding here. I look like max headroom. So, so these colors to go well with me. Zoom gali. Okay. I can't find the exact place I'm looking for. So we'll have to do this outside, and then when you get a chance to look at it in here, The Gemara in Zvachim 88b tells us that the Choshen Mishpat had a very important job. It had the ability to give kapara, to forgive misjustice, right? A lack of justice, miscarriage of justice. And the question is how, just like we asked before, how is it seen in the actual item itself? Great question. So the Akedat Yitzchak, or Yitzchak Arama of Spain, who lived around the time of the Spanish Inquisition, actually died, I believe, 2 years later. So he writes, he spoke, and he writes that you have to understand what things cause a miscarriage of justice to begin with. How is it possible that a judge will give the wrong decision? That's what miscarriage of justice means. So there are four ways that can happen. Number one, think about it for a moment. Favoritism, right? A judge might like one of the two people in front of him more than the other. That's human. It's normal. It happens. It happens with I'm sure it happens with children. It happens with adults. You have a friend. You have not a friend. Let's say the rabbi has a congregation, and one of the two people who wants this case to be heard is one of his congregants. However he feels about the congregant, already there's going to be some sort of favoritism aspect. Maybe he likes him. Maybe the guy interrupts his lectures. I don't know, right? Whatever the case may be, might be a good thing, might be a bad thing. Either way, the fact that he's human and he has this relationship with these people is already a possibility for a miscarriage of justice. There are times like that when a judge should indeed abstain from the ruling and have somebody else take his place. But that's the idea. The idea is that favoritism is one of the four things that causes miscarriage of justice. Number two is it could be that the value that's being discussed is something that the judge doesn't think is worth his time. The judge might be a very rich man. The judge should be, by the way, a rich man. Might be so rich that the $3 or something that I just saw online, somebody was complaining that they bought tortillas in a store not far away, and there's a hole in the bag. It looks like it was chewed on. It looked like there was some waste from vermin in the bag. And the person was complaining. I don't want to shop in the store anymore. And somebody said, relax. First of all, it might not be the store; it might have been the factory. It's any number of places where this could have happened. And the reason I bring this up is because one of the people suggested, hey, take that instead of complaining online, take that bag of tortillas and send it back to the store. So this lady responded, $3 isn't worth my time. Yeah, it might not be worth your time, but this can also happen in the case, right? The judge sees two people arguing about $3, and it's a joke. You're wasting my time. This isn't why I passed the bar exam and finished law school and whatever judges have to do to get elected and to step up one step past being an attorney. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's a judge school. I don't know. So it shows you how much I know about the legal system. But that's the point, is that the second thing that could cause miscarriage of justice is the judge's personal bias, not against any of the individual people, against the case itself. I don't care about this case, so I can rule however I want to rule. It doesn't really, it's not important in his mind. It reminds me of the famous statement of Shlomo Wolbe, also Yaakov Kamenetsky would say things like this, that we often, especially when it comes to parents and children, we often treat children's belongings. It's a plastic little 5-penny, toy boat. It's nothing. I don't know. The toy boats that were available in my generation by now probably worth a lot more than 5 cents, even without accounting for inflation. But for the toy boat that you think is worth 5 cents to a child in the bathtub, it could be worth millions. Taking that toy away from taking the toy out of the bathtub to punish the child is similar to taking a yacht away from somebody in real life, outside the toy world. That would hurt. That would be an oppressive thing. And that's kind of the idea of that punishment. But the important thing here, again, the point is the value of something is relative to the person. And if the judge decides to sort of turn off their brain when they go into court, because the value that these two litigants are discussing is so low, that's already a problem. It's going to lead to miscarriage of justice. Number 3, the third thing that can lead to miscarriage of justice is just the fact that just like if a judge might want to rule in favor of a particular litigant because he's a congregant or a friend, etc., the exact opposite can happen also. The judge might not want to perform the right justice because of something that he's afraid of from the litigants, right? Let's say the litigant has a newspaper, right? Is going to discourage people from voting for this judge. So even if the judge doesn't like the person, it's the intimidation, the fear of reprisal. So that too is one of the reasons for miscarriage of justice in our world, unfortunately. That has still not changed. And last but not least, miscarriage of justice can come from, most obvious answer, the judge not knowing the correct answer. Just ignorance. Apathy, ignorance, all of these things can lead to miscarriage of justice. So when the rabbis in the Gemara and Zvachim say that the Choshen Mishpat atones for miscarriage of justice, Rav Yitzchak Harama just listed for us 4 reasons why miscarriage of justice might happen. And there are 4 reasons. And there are also 4 rows on the Choshen Mishpat. Choshen Mishpat is 4 rows. Perhaps that's exactly why this works as an atonement for miscarriage of justice, because a judge who might be going into court and sees the clothing of the kohen wearing the ephod, that might discourage that person from acting incorrectly and judging a case based on ignorance. Maybe they'll hit the books harder. They'll look into an issue. They'll do some research, perhaps. So all of that is part of why and how the justice can be miscarried, and how this particular item might be the cure for that. Wow, this is a very long piece, much longer than I thought. I apologize. Here we go. It's interesting when I scroll, that's when that happens with the screen. All right. Okay, wow. Here we go. Okay, Rav Hirsch. There's an item that the kohen wore as a sort of golden sort of crown item around his forehead, and that was called the tzitz. Vaya al metzach Aaron. So the verse tells us. One moment. Okay, yeah, that's gone. Baruch Hashem. Oh, yeah. Right. So 28:38. Oh, awkward. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble here finding the right page. Oh, there you go. Okay, so Aaron. So we're going to put on Aaron's forehead. V'nasa Aaron et avon hakadashim, and it's going to elevate Aaron from the sin of the kadashim, of the sacrifices. Asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael l'chol matnot kadshehem v'ya al matzchot hamid rotzon lahem l'fnei Hashem. So the tzitz, which was on the kohen's forehead, and it said Kodesh LaHashem on it. However, that was written. There's an argument in the Gemara about that. Right. So the question is, how did this work? How did this provide atonement for what it provided atonement, which is Aaron's so this was supposed to provide atonement for any kind of incorrect philosophies and thoughts that were done with the sacrifices. In other words, the sacrifices, when somebody brought a sacrifice, the intention of the sacrifice was an important thing. It couldn't be, you couldn't plan on eating it at a later time. You couldn't plan on eating it in separate meals. You couldn't, if it was a sin offering, it needed to be a sin offering, not of this, not of that. It had to be kosher and clean and everything. There are a lot of details to sacrifices. We'll get to that, God willing, in Sefer Vayikra, Leviticus. But here, Rav Samson Rafal Hirsch has an essay. It's a short essay in comparison to some of his other ones here. An essay about why the tzitz worked to clean the kohen of these incorrect thoughts that he had while doing the services. And it's a long piece too. I sort of cut out some of the parts. The Kohen Gadol represents the whole service of the sanctuary, and the inscription Kodesh LaHashem, holy to God, on his forehead proclaims the name of God, which expresses the whole essence of the one God in his absolutely free personal being. The sanctuary is consecrated to him, and all the sacred things of the sanctuary are directed to him. In other words, the sanctity of the sanctuary is not an independent thing. That it's holy because, it was made from holy stones or something. It's holy because Hashem said to make it, and doing what Hashem says is what makes something holy. Hence, the tzitz is designed to nullify any defect or impurity these sacred things might suffer in respect to their unanswering direction to the one God. So if everything in the Mishkan is supposed to represent our desire to grow and become spiritually stronger, so then the tzitz, by making an avenue for forgiveness in this dimension, that means the tzitz itself is somehow making God holy, or reminding us that God is holy. That's not exactly clear. So hence, the tzitz is designed to nullify any defect or impurity these sacred things might suffer in respect to their unanswering direction to the one God. Hashem is untouched. It's just these things might become sullied somehow by the wrong thoughts. the positive proclamation of Kodesh LaHashem, which radiates from the forehead of the Kohen Gadol throughout the sanctuary and to all its sacred things, inscribing them with the inscription of Kodesh LaHashem, can nullify serious errors, as we shall see. If not for the tzitz, the sacred things could not escape this error. The tzitz nullifies only conditions that are inherent in the things themselves, and only so long as these conditions remain within the limited sphere of the sanctuary. Later we will elaborate on this. And he does. From the oral law, he quotes here the Gemara, Pesachim, and Menachot, and Zvachim, several places. We learn the following: the tzitz effects complete ritzui, as removal of the qualitative cause removal of the disqualification caused by tuma, and only by tuma, only for olim, which are offering parts that are placed upon the altar, such as the imurim, komets, and dam, right? The leftover pieces, call it, that are burnt up in fire. That's called an ola. This ritzu is affected by the proclamation of Kodesh LaHashem that is only on the tzitz, but only in respect to those objects that are offered upon the altar as an expression of direct surrender to God. That's what the point of a sacrifice is. I'm giving a sacrifice. I admit I can't do it myself. I couldn't have raised this animal myself. I couldn't have birthed this animal myself. It's all up to you, Hashem. And so I'm sort of, that's the symbolism of this action. As to achilut, those are the sacrifices that are eaten, such as the basar, the ritzu affected by the tzitz, is less certain, for in their case, the relationship of God is not direct, owing to the proximity of the kohanim and the baalim who partake of the offering. Of course, the person giving the offering can position himself or herself closer to the kohen. That's if that's the place that they can go. That's not the issue. But the point is, it says, except for the pasul tuma, none of the psulei hakadashim are totally antithetical to the pure conception of God, which the name Hashem conveys to Jewish consciousness. Protective of the purity of the conception is the basis for the whole consecration. The whole consecration and purpose of the sanctuary. And none of them can be removed and nullified by the positive protesting proclamation of the tzitz, Kodesh LaHashem. In other words, we're not making things disappear. If it became pasul, wearing the tzitz won't make it kosher all of a sudden. None of the other psulim, Yotze, Chutz Lizmano, Chutz Limkomo, none of them impinge on the conception of God itself. They merely introduce disturbing ideas into the sphere of our relation to God. Hence, the Torah, the truth. Hence the truth of Kodesh LaHashem does not remove and nullify them. The fact that the Kohen's clothing says "Holy to God," and that's what it sort of that's what it beams out of him, doesn't make everything he looks at become holy all of a sudden. And on the other hand, like you just said, it's the idea that's being nullified, not the thing itself. For Tuma is a state, this impurity is a state in which every living thing, including man who is called to moral freedom, submits to the ruling force of the body. That's what Tuma is. That's the essence of Tuma in Rav Hirsch's philosophy that he talks about in many other places. But the idea is that being holy means taking on the responsibility of being more than human. The essence of this force is embodied in death. Right? Death is the state where you are no longer free to do anything. Hence, no tumat mate. Hence, tumat mate is avi avot tuma. The worst kind of tuma, though the strongest kind of tuma, comes from death. somebody died, so they emanate this kind of impurity. Hence, tumat mate is aviyah or tuma. I read that. Tuma signifies the compulsion of natural forces, the power that basically has been considered a deity by pagans throughout the ages. People who deny the freedom of God as they deny the freedom of man, and who think that everything is subject to the physical compulsion of blind governing necessity. So that is not always true, right? That's not what freedom is. Freedom is not letting your body do whatever it wants. I feel like doing this today. That's not freedom. You're a slave to your body. To break out of that, that's actual freedom. I had a pretty common when you do kosher work, when you're like me and you travel from restaurant to restaurant to check on the kosher status of certain things. So very often you'll bump into somebody who will say, "Oh, my life is easy. I can eat wherever I want. I can do whatever I want." So this person, I don't usually respond, but this person sort of left me room to respond. Let's say it like that. And I said that being able to do whatever you want is not freedom. Every animal can do whatever it wants. The definition of freedom is doing what you don't want, being able to say no to something. That's actual freedom. When you can do that, then you know you're free. And that's the symbol of the tzitz. That's what makes these items quote unquote cleaner. Is that we are able to fight back against the forces of our nature. Okay. Let's skip to chapter 30, verse 1, where the end of the parsha basically starts talking about a completely different mizbeach. Whoa. Completely different mizbeach. There were two altars in the temple. Right? One was the mizbeach, the altar on which animals were sacrificed, and this other one, chapter 30, verse 1, introduces the idea of Ve'asita mizbeach ktoret. Sorry, Ve'asita mizbeach miktar ktoret. Right? You're supposed to make a mizbeach, an altar, onto which you will be burning incense. Ate shitim tasa oto, and then you're going to make them out of shitim, out of acacia wood. So you're going to burn this fuel in order to then sacrifice basically incense, to burn incense. A common question, very beautifully put by at least two of the commentaries we're going to look at today. A common question is, why is this here? Right? It's a common question throughout the Torah. Torah seems to have an order, right? All of a sudden, we're talking about the clothing of the kohen. We're talking about some of the sacrifices they're going to need to do when they are first inaugurated. And then we go, let's talk about this other piece of the Mishkan. Whoa. We talked about the Mishkan last week, right? In parsha Teruma, we talked about what goes in the Mishkan. Why didn't we talk about this mizbeach haktoret then? Why are we talking about it now? So there are, like I said, a number of answers. Today, if you don't mind, we're going to look at Rav Zalman Sorotzkin's Oznaim LaTorah and Rav Chaim Kanievsky's Tama Dekra. Now, it happens to be, this week, I believe, is the yard site of Rav Chaim Kanievsky, or it's coming up. And so it's worthwhile to learn his Torah as a schut for his neshama. This is his first yard site this year, 5783. Gadol Hador passed away last year. A year ago now. Can't believe we're still alive without him. He was such an important central figure in Jewish life. Basically, felt sometimes like he was sustaining the whole world. and without him, it's been difficult. Anyway, of course, we still have leaders, etc., etc. Not for now. V'asita mizbeach miktar ketoret. Rabim Shoel. Many people ask, as I suggested, Lama lo nemar tzivu zeh bimkomo. Why didn't the Torah teach this teaching at its more proper time? In other words, back in Parsha Truma. Nitzaveh Moshe alasiet klei ha'heichal. When he's talking about making the heichal, the shulchan, the menorah, so that's when it would have been a great time. That's when it would have been a great time to bring up this Torah mizbeach as well. Talking about all the vessels of the Beit Hamikdash. Talk about this one. It seems like it was forgotten and put in the back of the last chapter of the next book or something. It seems very strange. Shakelim ha'elu lo hayu lahem shnayim. They didn't have any seconds, right? Hishtamesh bahem. Im nitmu harishonim. Masha katsuv kan shelo hayu lahem shnayim. Mitcharim imahem b'chaser o moed v'tichach namru b'mkomam. So he says that let's keep going. Okay, so there are certain vessels that are important. It's obviously and visually impressive and important. Aval mizbeach hazahav, but this golden altar, yesh dugmato b'petach oel moed. It's got its place in the opening of the tent of meeting. Hainu mizbeach ha'olah, v'lo haya mizbeach ha'ketoret emor bimkomo. But the ketoret, and the Torah says of the golden mizbeach that it's in its place. It doesn't say the same language when it comes to this particular one. It doesn't say that it's in its place. Hainu mezalzalim hamizbeach ha'olah harei mizevach ha'ketoret mitzupa zahav omed ha'cheichal k'tiren alav ketoret. So, because of the gold and because of all the things that go into it, masha enken mizbeach ha'olah shehu mitzupa nechoshet v'omed petach. It's made from the choshet is made from metal, and it's at the opening of the Aron, the Mishkan courtyard. Umakriyim alav chalav adam, and we put on it chalav adam. We put on it fats and blood. V'tichach lo nizkar mizbech hazahav yachad im hashulchan amenorah u'mizeh anu lamdi she'enu ikar. So when it comes to that particular altar, it could be mentioned with the other things that are going to be used in a similar fashion. Sharei nishlumu kol klei hamikdash v'achatzer shehu lo nizkar rak achrei kol eila. Gam nemar b'mizbeach ha'olah haya mizbeach kodesh kodashim k'mo mizbeach hazahav. And it says about this mizbeach that was for the sacrifices, that mizbeach kodesh kodashim, it was like the holy of holies. K'mo mizbeach hazahav kodesh kodashim hu below od ela she'im ein mizbeach ha'olah afilu rak nivgam yevshar lahakriv shuv karban. If you don't have that mizbech, if you don't have that altar for the sacrifices, when it's time to do a sacrifice, for whatever reason, maybe it became tameh, maybe the Greeks or the Romans destroyed it or ruined it, or did gross things on it. Who knows? Either way, if it's not available for the sacrifices, you don't make the sacrifices. Masha Einkein Maktirin Ketoret Bimkomo She'ein Mizbeach Ma'akev. Rambam writes in Perek Gimel of Chilchot Tamidim that this particular altar for the Ketoret, if you don't have this altar and we have to bring incense offerings, so we still do the offering. And you're going to ask me where. So the Rambam there writes you do it in the place where the mizbeach was supposed to be, or where it was. If it's been destroyed, you can do the Ketoret right there. So in other words, you don't really need it. So what does that tell you? What's the lesson here? So the lesson is very impressive. The fact is that this mizbeach is as special, unique but different, but at the same time also as special as the other mizbeach, as the other altar. Even though the other altar also gets a lot more press, a lot more PR. That altar is the one with the sacrifices. We learned so much about the sacrifices. This one is just incense. You might think, it's just incense. It's nothing. It's just to smell things up. The Rambam himself, we've learned in previous years, Rambam himself says the whole point of the incense was just to make it so that the area of the Mishkan doesn't smell like a slaughterhouse. Right? It smells a lot better because it's got burning incense going, etc. But aside from that, the point is that because they're both important, they can't be mentioned together. Right? If you've got two very important things and you're going to talk about one more than the other, it's going to sound like that one is more important, which is not true. Both of them are equally important, and they have unique aspects to them. This one's not is not necessary when you don't have it. The other one you can't do a sacrifice without it. Right? So they have unique aspects to them. But in the end result is that they are different and equally holy, and that's why they're mentioned in different parshiot, right? In other words, we had the parsha of all the kelim of the Beit HaMikdash, of the Mishkan, in last week's parsha. We had the shulchan and the etc., right? And the menorah, and so we had the mizbeach. So then, giving us this parsha, this chapter, right, of the clothing of the kohen, and then shoving in the stuff about this sacrificial altar on which only incense was placed. So by doing this in this way, it elevates the greatness of this particular mizbeach. You have the time to concentrate on this, to think about it, to realize that it too is a very holy thing for Hashem. Okay, and like I said, a comment from Rav Chaim Kanievsky in time for his yard site. In Talmud Dekra, his Torah commentary, he asks the question also, parsha mizbeach ha'ketoret ne'amar b'sof parsha Tetzaveh. Why is it here below b'truma, and why isn't it in truma? V'chein parsha sakiyur ne'amar b'kitisa. And also we're going to have later on, we're going to have the kior with which the kohanim wash their hands and feet. So that's the kior, and that's going to be mentioned in next week's parsha. Also out of place if you're thinking about the previous parsha, Parsha Truma, of being the parsha where all of these things are mentioned. So why is it mentioned? Why isn't it mentioned? So why is it mentioned here, not in Truma? It says in the Gemara Zvachim, Nun Tet Aleph 59a, Mizevach Shenekar Mektirin Ketoret B'Mkomo V'Gabekir Amru Sham Kuli Alma Bet B'Kol Klei Makadashim. So he too brings this idea that In Cain, Dvarim Elu Ein Ma'akmim. So it says about these two things, the kior and the mizbeach hanechoshet. Regarding both of them, right? Regarding both of them, if they are missing for whatever reason, you can still substitute in for them, just like Rav Zalman Sorotskin said, but a little bit different here. As we're about to see, also he brings in the kiur, which Oznaim LaTorah did not bring up. Kiur Amru Sham Kuli Alma Beta. Im Kain Devarim Elu Ein Ma'akvim B'Maaseh Markava. They were not necessary. Maaseh Markava Rak LeMitzvah Ba'alma. It's the ideal state of the mitzvah is to have these things. If you don't have them, so fine. You still perform the service. How you wash your hands, not going to get into. How they did it without the kiur, not for now. Parsha Truma. And this is you come parsha Truma. So here there's a mission. Is that both next week's parsha, because we want to have the right. So one of the laws, chapter 30, verse 9, Lo talu alav k'torat zara. You should not sacrifice zara, meaning different, unique, alien incense on this. V'ola mincha nesach lo tisku alav. And you can't make other sacrifices on it. You can't even do nisuch on it. You can't even pour the wine libations onto this altar. It's only for incense. So says Rashi, and I just want to bring this up. This isn't there might not be a great moral point in this, but this is important for parshanut, to understand how and why the different commentaries argue about certain things. Sometimes it has to do with language. Yeah, I hope the sound is better now. Okay. Okay. So Rashi says, K'torat zara, this alien incense, shum k'torat shel nidava, any kind of k'torat. So k'torat was incense. When did you bring the incense? So there was a required incense offering, right? That the kohanim had to do all the time. Then you could also, if you wanted to, individuals could dedicate and bring incense offerings. And that's called a Ktoret Shel Nedava. So, Shum Ktoret Shel Nedava, any foreign, the definition of foreign incense is any kind of Ktoret of Nedava. That's a promised one, not the obligatory communal one, but the individual's promised Nedava. Kulam Zarot Lo Chutz Mizu. Kulan Zarot Lo Chutz Mizu. So they are all strange except for this Ketoret. The only Ketoret that is brought on this altar is the daily one, the communal one. You can't bring your own ones, your own sacrifices here. Just because you promised you'd bring an incense sacrifice doesn't mean it's brought there. It's how it's brought, where it's brought, that's a different issue. But the Gemara Menachot talks about that. But for our purposes, just know that what Rashi's saying is that's what it means. This verse, the verse says, K'tor Zara, you can't burn alien, strange incense on here. Strange incense means, according to Rashi, any other kind of incense, not the ingredients, but the category, a category of individual promised incense. That's what you cannot bring onto this particular altar. Ramban usually disagrees with Rashi. It's not because he doesn't like Rashi. He calls him the father of all commentary. He very much approves and sometimes agrees with him and proves him from other sources, defends him against other attacks, the Ibn Ezra, etc. Rambam sometimes. All right, so that's the kind of the Ramban's modus operandi. So he says here, Shum Keturah Shel Nedava, he quotes Rashi, right? That the kind of Nedava that's a Ketoret, the kind of Ketoret that's a Ketoret Zara, the kind of incense offering that is the quote unquote foreign offering that the Torah talks about. Rashi says that it's any kind of offering that's voluntary and not the obligatory one for the community. Aval Unklus, then he quotes Unklus, which is a very common way that the ancient commentaries try to understand the Torah, is through Unklus's eyes. And Unklus was a Roman convert to Judaism, related to Nero. Not going to get into it now. He became a great commentary, and he didn't really comment. He translated, but as we know, translation is often commentary. You put in your own ideas into your translation. Onkelos, very much so. He, for example, worked very hard, famously, to get rid of any kind of anthropomorphism in the Torah. Right? Whenever Hashem says something physical about himself, my hand, my foot, my eye, the eye of God is watching Yerushalayim. So God doesn't have an eye. So how Unkos would translate that is different. It'll say Hashem is always focusing on Yerushalayim, which is what it means anyway. But that's not for now. Here, though, Unkos translates Ktored Busmin Nuchrain. So Busmin Nuchrain is Aramaic. You can usually tell by the last letter. The last letter is a nun. That's how you say plural in Aramaic, right? Instead of mem being the plural in Hebrew. And ancient Aramaic, anyway, I don't know what modern day Aramaic is like, but Busmin Nuchrain means incense of foreign spices. Busmin, bisamim, right? The bisamim are foreign. So what that means is Omar Ketorat Busmin Nuchrain, Lo Targum Nuchrita. He didn't say in the singular that foreign spice, right? He said foreign spices. Ratza, what he means is lefarish. He means to say shelo yasek Torah misamim acherim. You can make your sacrifice, your incense sacrifice, but not out of any other kind of ingredients. You have specific ingredients. You have a recipe for how to make the besamim for the ketoret. You can't change that. Anything other than that, you can't bring to this altar. Which means, mind-blowing, any incense offering, whether it's a nedava, unlike Rashi, whether it's communal, whether it's individual, whether it's a promised one, whether it's a required one, either voluntary, required, whichever one it is, you can bring that to this particular mizbeach, says Ramban. What can't you do? You can't use other kinds of spices. The spices have to be what it says in the recipe, and that's it. Ketoret zara then means foreign spice, doesn't mean different category of spice. It means different ingredients in the same idea. Im hosif ba samim acherim yavor belav hazeh. So if you added other spices, if you put in something else into the mix, then that's going to be a problem. And that's what and that's also, by the way, what the Rambam says in Hilchot Klei HaMikdash 2:11, where he agrees with the Ramban. Interestingly, actually, he agrees with both. It's sort of a pshara, sort of a compromise position of the Rambam, where he takes the Rashi and the Ramban together. So you can't bring, this is how he paskins halacha. I don't know what other commentaries write on Rambam here, but number one, he says that you can't bring alien your own spices onto this particular mizbeach, even if you follow the recipe, even if you did it perfectly, but if it's just you're doing it as an individual, you can't put it there. That's one thing that the Rambam says, as Rashi said, and the other thing is, like Ramban said, that you can't put you can put whatever you want on this altar as long as it follows the recipe. Whether it's your own, you promise to bring a sacrifice of incense, so you can bring that there, or the kohen is bringing for the whole community. Obviously, that's placed there. Either way, that is how Torah commentary often works. That is why there are disagreements of these kinds of things. And the best thing we can do is be like the Rambam and try to find some sort of compromise position wherever possible. Sometimes compromise is not possible, and in those cases, we stick to our guns if we must. All right. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your week and a Shabbat Shalom. Remember, this week is Parsha Zachor. There is a Torah obligation for every Jewish man, woman, and even children, if possible, to come and hear the end of the Torah reading this week. There's a lot to say on that. I think I've spoken about Parsha Zachor in previous parsha classes. Subscribe and the link down there, and try to see the playlist for Parsha Tetzaveh, and I'm sure we'll all have a lot more Torah we can enjoy together. Thank you for listening, and take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.